And we're joined by two member companies today. We've got if.Vehicles, who have developed a new innovative vehicle to support last mile logistics. Very exciting, very good concept, hopefully coming to fruition very soon. We've got Colin Ferguson as well from the Algorithm people, who will be talking about their fleet optimization software. Now, Bill Clare, CEO, and Colin, both great guys, come together to form a brilliant partnership. And this is, as I mentioned before, our live first ever member-to-member case study. So thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy the webinar, and I'll pass over to yourself, Colin. Thank you.
Yeah, morning everyone, and thanks for that intro, Rohan. And thanks everyone for joining this morning. It's much appreciated taking time out your day to come and listen to us today. So I'm Colin Ferguson. I'm the CEO here at the Algorithm people. My background is one of transport and logistics. So I've operated vehicles for final mile deliveries. So I understand, what's involved in that and all the pains and challenges around the day-to-day operation of just delivering and collecting goods. What I want to do this morning is I want to take you through my transport planner, which is our optimization platform that is helping transform final mile logistics for fleet operators, distributors, and manufacturers. And I want to talk about how that links in to the types of vehicles that if produce, and Bill will talk through that detail after I've been through the brief demonstration. So I'm going to share my screen. What could possibly go wrong now? So just bear with me. Yeah, so hopefully that's on the screen now and everyone can see the window My Transport Planner. So let me just do a little brief description and preamble of what My Transport Planner is and how it helps final mile deliveries and works with different drivetrain vehicles. So My Transport Planner is a web-based optimization tool. So essentially what it does is optimize and automate the planning process for fleets and organizations who use it. So rather than manually plan and decide which vehicles have to get which jobs and tasks and which order, you simply upload the jobs, visits, deliveries, collections, whatever those may be, to this platform. The vehicles are already in the system, which I'm going to show you a little bit about just now, and the algorithms behind the platform will optimize the jobs in the best sequence, considering things like charging infrastructure, if it's electric vehicles, how vehicles interact with each other, if it's mobile and transient hub type operations, so that's vehicle to vehicle, or straightforward delivery from depot through ICE vehicles, and how they would work within the platform. So that's what the platform does. It's a web-based platform, which means this can be accessed from any PC online, which during COVID has been really helpful to lots of fleets who have used it, because when they've not been able to get into the office, they can continue to do the planning from home or wherever they're based. So if I take you through this through the eyes of a fleet manager or an organization who would use it, and then the demo should take about 5 minutes or so, and then once we've got to that, I'll hand over to Bill, and then after that we can do some Q&As after that. Okay, so when you register for this platform, which you can do through our website, mytransportplanner.com, the first thing that you would do would be to set your company details up. So that's who you are as a fleet or organization that wants to optimize, where your depots are located. So that could be a single depot, or it could be a multiple depot organization. And it can also be home locations. So appreciating that lorry drivers take vehicles home. And again, when it comes to electric, they may be doing the charging back at home as well. So this platform supports all of those use cases. Resources are your drivers and vehicles. So the vehicles that you might set up are the vehicles that you have. But I should also say, if you're thinking about procuring vehicles, or particularly vehicles like if and you haven't got those vehicles and you want to know if they fit in with your organisation, this tool can also be used as a modelling tool and simulation tool to put these vehicles in that you might be looking at procuring and thinking about how they might fit in with your current duty cycles and deliveries. So you can use this platform as a modelling and simulation tool, but also as a BAU tool to do the planning day to day within an organisation. So I'll just take you through briefly what a resource setup looks like. So you would capture the resource name, which could be invariably the vehicle registration or route ID that it covers, so route 1 or whatever it may be. You can allocate it to a depot. So I've got test in there, but that could be whatever depot that you want to consider working with. It has a mobile application integrated with it, which means when the jobs are optimized and the itineraries and routes are created, they can be briefed out to the mobile devices. And that can also include where in the itinerary where the vehicle needs to charge up for how long. So what energy needs to go into the vehicle itself to then carry on its journey if it was electric, for example. So, you know, it's fairly advanced in what it can do and what it can consider. And that's the problem that this platform is really solving, where it's very hard for human beings in manual planning to work that sort of thing out manually. So it's definitely a significant solution to a significant problem. I won't go through every field, but just scrolling down, sort of parameters that are important to fleet operations are the attributes of the vehicle, what it can do, the attributes of the person that can drive the vehicle. Is it electric? What's its carrying capacity in weight, cube, or other parameters? What's its range? So if it's an electric vehicle, before it needs to recharge, what range can it do? Again, that's the factors that can be put into the system so that the calculation can happen. Cost, shift time, all of these sort of parameters, speed, that are in the gift of the user to set up. So very straightforward, and hopefully you can see already, you know, very intuitive to a user. If I now go into the route planning section, the route planning section is where you bring your jobs in. So once your vehicles, depots, infrastructure is set up within the system, because it may be that you want to locate a charge point at a depot or charge points to go back and recharge during the day, the second part of the setup is getting the jobs into the system. Now, we have an API that's with the platform that can pull the jobs in automatically, but we also have a manual import-export facility that you can download templates in Excel from the platform, from the My Utilities section on the toolbar. There's full tutorial videos with the platform that allow you as a user to understand how it works, and if you're modeling, how you would import the data to do that on a one-off basis. But once the jobs are imported or they come in through the API, then what the user might do is go to the job allocation section and they can visualize those jobs on the map. So I've got a very small data set just to show you on this session, so it doesn't take too long to plan. Essentially, the red circles and jobs on the map are the collections and deliveries to be made. The vehicles at the right-hand side are the vehicles that are available to do those tasks. Now, typically, if planning is being done manually, whether it's in an urban area or this type of you know, geographical footprint, which is a wider area, then lots of manual planning is done in areas. So you know, the vehicles will be planned, you know, area 1, route 2, that sort of thing, and that's great. However, when you optimize using algorithms, they will tend not to consider areas so much, but that's where the efficiencies are gained. And the reduction in miles traveled and vehicle utilization increases can be up to 30% by using algorithms. So it's a massive prize to go automated rather than manual, and also to not consider just area planning on its own. That said, the platform can support area planning, and again, when we're in urban areas, so there's a lot of deliveries there in Cardiff, for example, in Swansea, that's where the smaller vehicles, and if.Vehicles in particular, would come into their own, where the larger vehicles that are travelling around the wider geographical areas could then interact with those vehicles to do the final mile deliveries. However, this platform does all that for you. You don't need to do the thinking, and that's the point. Okay, so as a user, what would happen is you would simply hit the optimize button once all the jobs are imported and the vehicles are set. And in this example, I'm going to select full, which is I want the platform to optimize everything. It's telling me how much credits I'm going to use. The reason for that, this is a full pay-as-you-go platform. It's the UK's first pay-as-you-go platform, which means you can pop a credit card in and buy credits to optimize rather than take out a lengthy contract, which is also fantastic for modeling. Should you just want to do one-off scenario planning, or even simulate, are the vehicles that I'm thinking about procuring good for me? So by selecting yes, what's now happening is the jobs and the vehicles that are available are being sent to the algorithm, and the algorithm is going to return the answer in a second or two and tell me how many vehicles I need to solve the problem. And that would also include if the vehicles choose mobile and transient hub vehicles to interact with to do, say, the final mile where it's efficient to do so. Now, I've deliberately set a job that cannot be done in Mid Wales, just so you can see that as an example. And that might be because it's too heavy for the vehicles. It can't be done from a time point of view or other reasons. So if something can't actually be done, it goes on the map and you can drill into the reasons why. However, what's just happened is the algorithm and platform has allocated all the jobs in the map to the vehicles at the right-hand side, and the vehicles that it's allocated to have gone green. Okay, the vehicles it hasn't used remain unallocated, but hopefully what you can see from that is it only took a few seconds to plan a whole day's work for this particular data set. So one of the other added benefits for final mile logistics companies is the speed that the algorithm takes to produce its plan. So moving on to the last segment in this presentation, once the planning is done, you can select the finish button and it takes you to a dashboard of statistics. And those statistics tell you how many vehicles you've used, how many jobs you've done, perhaps what the quantity is. I hadn't set the costs and mileage up, but if I had done so, it would have appeared there, the total shift time and the total distance. It also tells me the resources that I haven't used. In our next version, that dashboard will also have the CO2 used, where it's ICE vehicles in particular. So you'll know if you've run it the way that it's been done manually, and then run it again the way that the algorithm has chosen, you'll know the savings that you have made, both in carbon and perhaps in cost, and also in addition, vehicle utilisation and time. Once the routes are produced, the routes are displayed at the bottom of the screen. And if I was to go into this particular route at the top, it tells me the sequence I'm doing the jobs in, and crucially the ETA of when I'll be there. And you can see that these ones are early in the morning because this data set is jobs that are delivered during the night. And if, for example, these jobs were interacting with a mobile and transient hub vehicle such as if's, then also that would be on the itinerary of when it needs to do the exchange, where and when. And that can be produced as an output to the drivers, either through sending it to a mobile app, which is obviously the most logical way, or an export out to PDF or Excel if it's just a management report. And what you're able to do once the routes are produced is it produces the routes on the screen in different colours. So if I zoom into that, you can see there's lots of different colours, and where there's changeover points of vehicles, they can be flagged to show where that is in the itinerary. So as a visual tool, it's very, very easy to use. Hopefully you can see that. Last year, it was described as the Netflix of route optimization by motor transport, just to give you a feel for how it's perceived in the marketplace, because we've created it like a consumer tool rather than perhaps more of a commercial tool. So very easy to use, and what you'd expect if you're going online and buying something. In this case, it just happens to be optimization credits. And then lastly, to wrap up, before I hand over to Bill, if I was wanting to visualize an individual route itself, if we pick that one that we were in, then you can see there the vehicle is leaving its depot in the Gloucestershire area, going down and doing 4 jobs and then going back again. Now, hypothetically, where it got to Barnstable, rather than do the one right in the coast, that could actually exchange that with a vehicle such as if that vehicle was in that area, and that could do the final mile, and therefore it would save the mileage going in to that area and back again and deliver the final mile aspect more efficiently. So that's the sort of logic that the algorithm would use, where we could then see the mileage saving and the total distance at the top right and the total time saving, and ultimately the emissions saving for that vehicle that's based in Gloucester, translated to the cost of the vehicle to deliver the task using the smaller micro vehicle. So from that perspective, it's quite easy for the system to allocate that. So that's the end of the presentation. I want to keep it, reasonably brief. Don't want to bore you to death with everything. I think the only parts to wrap up on is commercially. We've talked about this pay-as-you-go option, which we have, but we also have normal SaaS contracts where a client can, do a 3-year contract or a 2-year contract if they prefer, with the pricing being incentivized. And we have enterprise solutions where we can bespoke the solution for the client. So if a large fleet is looking to incorporate the vehicles that if has and maybe show them on the map in a different icon or display, we can support what that might look like, through our enterprise version as well. So that gives it an end-to-end solution for a fleet manager, and hopefully that was at least semi-interesting to you, and I'm looking forward to any questions that you might have when we get to that segment. Okay, so Bill, shall I hand over to you or back to Rohan and Laura, and then I can stop talking for a little while.
Shall I just pick straight up? Seems like I have. So thank you, Colin. If I hadn't realised before why we thought you were such a perfect partner, seeing that presentation and having such a clear graphic explanation of an outstanding system like that, that convinced me that we've done the right thing. Thank you so much. Continuing the vein of thanks very much to Rohan and Laura in particular at NEAA for today, but more generally than that, we've been within the organisation for coming up for a year. They've been fantastically supportive, and that's made an enormous difference to a company like us, which is effectively just starting out, and we can't tell you how grateful we are. And I can't imagine it's a coincidence that there are so many positive developments going on in automotive terms in the Northeast. For example, things like British Volt and within the last few days, the Nissan batteries. It can't be a coincidence that there is an organisation which is as active and supportive as NEAA, working so hard in the sector. So I commend you as an organisation, but also on a micro level for what you've been doing for us. I'm going to keep my opening remarks brief, picking up on the theme that Colin just mentioned, not least because as we're starting out, it's a little difficult to know what particular aspect of what we're about people will be interested in. So my goal will be to just give you a sense and then to invite you to take the discussion wherever you would like. I don't want to sound too overconfident, but there is quite a lot for us to talk about. There's no way that you can easily and sensibly compress that into a short period of time. So we hope that some of you will feel that this is an opportunity to begin a relationship with us. And Laura and Rohan, I know, will give you the means to engage in such a dialogue further in due course if you'd like. So please see this as an opportunity to get things going, but in the event that there's stuff that you'd like to follow up on, please do. We'd love to keep in touch with you. Picking up on what Colin touched on, where he was speaking about, for example, at the end, do you use one of our vehicles to go from Barnstable to Bideford in North Devon? We think that we're relevant because we're confident that we can literally help to transform how last mile delivery is done. I mean, we all know that everybody's being bombarded with last mile deliveries now as a consequence of COVID, but more widely. And we're confident that the approach that we're adopting will make us very relevant to how that debate evolves. I don't know about you watching today, but it seems very difficult to go anywhere these days without being aware quickly of the breadth and the depth of the concern about how our economies more generally can develop without jeopardizing the achievement of the net zero by 2050 goal. And if our interpretation of that debate is right, there seems to be a fairly strongly held view that the world faces an either-or choice. Either we ensure the kind of economic development that as societies we need, or we do what we can to avert environmental catastrophe. The beauty of our technology, at least we believe this is the case, is that it actually allows societies to tick both of those boxes. We facilitate the economic growth that we all aspire to, but we do it in very green ways. The way we've gone about achieving that was actually to go back completely to first principles. We didn't want to start with a vision in our minds of what a last mile delivery 21st century version would look like. We wanted to figure out what such a vehicle would need to do, and then we'd come up with a vehicle which achieved those precise goals. The goals that we came up with, I'm talking now kind of autumn 2018, we felt that it would be necessary to have a significantly increased parcel carrying capacity. Well, if we'd known that COVID was coming, we would simply have placed even more emphasis on that, because obviously the virus has accelerated the growth of last mile deliveries. Critically, we wanted also to hugely reduce CO2 emissions. And I think that really is a major differentiator for us. Obviously, we wanted to eliminate tailpipe emissions, and anyone who's going electric is doing that, which is great. We also wanted to significantly cut congestion. The two versions of that, which most commonly occur in towns and cities, that caused by traffic jams and that caused by parking, which is, I'm sure we've all experienced, a bit of a curse if you happen to be stuck behind a white van. What we came up with is the world's only dual mode and very light vehicle, the if Micro, and that is featured obviously on our website, and working with our partners at the algorithm people, the kind of vehicle and freight management software and accompanying systems which ensure that the vehicle itself can achieve its full objectives. Just going back to the point I made about the importance in our minds of hugely reducing CO2 emissions, if you want to express it in perhaps easy to grasp terms, using a white van, the so-called white vans, which weigh about 3,000 kilograms roughly, to carry 150 parcels which weigh roughly 150 kilograms at most, that strikes us as a little bit like going around Sainsbury's with a shopping trolley and one apple in it, or taking a bus or using a bus to cross Newcastle just to carry one passenger. We felt that the key requirement was a vehicle which was big enough, robust enough to do what was necessary, but no more than that. And as a consequence of that, we've come up with a vehicle which will weigh in the region of 40 kilograms. You drive it on the roads. When you get to your destination, you simply step off it and you pull it or push it as a trolley, because as we'll all appreciate, the very last part of the journey is very important, because crossing pavements poses lots of challenges, not least the safety of the people who are also on the pavements. And so those are the key features of our vehicles. Those are the things which will make them different from everything else currently in the marketplace. A further beauty of the technology that we're working with is that it actually will also yield very significant commercial benefits for those who use them. And there is a very strong parallel additionally here with Colin and TAP, because as Colin illustrated, there are enormous commercial benefits to be had using his software. Well, we complement those by the incorporation of our vehicles into the kind of networks that Colin was talking about. So I hope that gives you a flavour. I would just close by saying that although we remain a comparatively small company, in the 2.5 years since we set up, we've added my colleagues Janetta and Ben and Kristen, real specialists in design and engineering, to work with our team. Janetta is on the call today, and John Gollins is giving us an enormous amount of assistance on the financial side. John's with us too as well. So what we're finding, particularly over the last 3 to 4 months, which coincides beautifully with the NEAA involvement today, is that it feels to us as though we've kind of crossed the Rubicon, and what is now happening is that there is a widespread realization that we've got something that's relevant. We don't claim to have all the answers, and we know there are lots of other people doing really good imaginative stuff, which we welcome. Okay, they're theoretically our commercial competitors, but anything that enables society to grow economically and also in a green way is a good thing for us. So we are confident that we're in a good place to be able to use events like today as a springboard, and things like COP26 and so on, we hope will reinforce those kind of trends. But in closing, thanks again to Colin and to Nats, particularly at TAP, and to Rohan and Laura and everybody at NEAA for everything that you've done with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bill. Thanks, Colin. So obviously we invite people to ask any questions. We've got a chat function facility that people can post questions. They come through to me anonymously, so obviously this might encourage more questions. Don't be shy. Obviously this is a great concept, so please do ask anything if there are any burning questions. We've had a few through already. One for you, Bill. If I was looking to expand my fleet and chose to use if.Vehicle, how many would I need to purchase compared to a traditional van or an electric van?
We're basically looking at a ratio of around one white van and 4, 5, 6 of our vehicles to replace around 6 white vans. Each operator, we recognise, has different systems and therefore different requirements. And a key feature of our approach is that we make everything that we create personal, as it were, to the needs of the end user, which is why I'm a little bit vague in terms of precise numbers, because different companies will operate in different ways. But that kind of ballpark I mean, some of you may be aware that there's been some attention given recently by Ford and Hermes to a very detailed study that they did around Christmas time. And I think the figures were, this was using in very inner city areas, what we would call porters, people who are carrying the packages for the very last part of the journey. And off the top of my head, I think what's happened there is that they've replaced 6 white vans with a couple of white vans and 6 porters. We can do the same with a single white van and half a dozen of our vehicles and achieve a great deal improved service standards.
It's probably well just building out on that as well, if I may. So one of the services that we provide is within our decarbonisation of fleets service and strategy at the algorithm people is evidence-based analysis. So rather than having to guess how many vehicles that you might need, our approach is to come into an organisation and baseline what they're currently doing with their current vehicles, so measuring statistics like, you know, cost, vehicle utilisation, emissions, that sort of thing, and then put in, you know, for example, here the if.Vehicles. It can also be other vehicles that you might require to do a job that perhaps these vehicles might not be suitable for. So this could be a whole procurement play. And then allow the system to say, right, okay, could we firstly optimize what we've got, which could generate 10, 20, 30% savings, and then that gives the budget also for the vehicle procurement. But it's likely that we would actually reduce the existing fleet before we need to then overlay the new vehicles, and that gives the business case for the procurement of the vehicles through evidence-based analysis. So that's a service that we provide. We do an initial benchmark for free initially, just there's no cost to that, so everyone's crystal clear. And it can also even extend to grey fleets as well and car fleets. It doesn't have to just be commercials, but you know, on the commercial side and the delivery side, the evidence-based analysis approach could be something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And probably one for you as well, Colin. What is the return on investment for something like my transport planning?
Yes, so again, there's probably 2 answers to that. So if we look at optimization on its own, it's proven to save you know, the sort of numbers we've been talking about on this session. And in fact, we earlier this year we won an innovation award for cost reduction for the platform. So that has absolutely been validated. So, you know, our typical savings are 20% reduction in miles and so on. So if you use that saving, then if you're looking at optimization on its own, it's generally self-funding because the savings that are generated are far greater than the investment in the software and the technology by quite a margin. So the technology itself is self-funding. But when you pair it with the vehicle procurement, so if we save a fleet 20% or 10% even, that's a big sum of money, generally speaking, in most organizations. And they can use that sum of money in savings to then put into the procurement pot, as I've said, for the vehicles. So the ROI very much depends on if you're optimizing your existing fleet, then considering, you know, what you're going to get through optimization, and then also what then you're bringing in. So we often see it's cost neutral or savings even with the vehicles coming in, and even sometimes with the infrastructure, because of the savings we've made in general elsewhere. And that's a low-hanging fruit that sometimes fleets overlook, that we can simply just optimize now and reduce carbon and costs on their existing vehicles, and then transition to the likes of the vehicles that if has, but hopefully in many cases on a cost neutral basis, and that's the key commercially.
Ballpark figures from our standpoint, if I might jump in there, Laura. I mentioned the Ford and Hermes exercise. I mean, we take very great care to be respectful of the precise numbers, and so this is just a general figure. But the 6 vehicles, the so-called white vans that they would have been using, in those circumstances probably would have cost 35,000 plus, particularly if they were electric vehicles, which in fairness to them they were. For us, we would expect one of our units to come in at around £12,000. So there's obviously a significant capital cost saving there. In terms of the recurrent cost, broadly speaking, we're confident that on a per parcel basis, we would reduce the operating costs by at least 30%. So I think it's reasonable to say that the commercial impact of this technology, not to mention the green impact, is going to be very significant. But just to repeat the point I made a little while ago, we tailor everything we do specifically to the needs of the end user. Obviously, we fully incorporate all of the TAP contribution, the algorithm people contribution to that. And picking up on one of the points that Colin made in his earlier presentation, the fact that we can visualize how our technology will be employed using MTP, My Transport Planner, gives us an even clearer upfront indication of what a potential end user could, how a potential end user could expect to benefit. But in answer to the original question, what's the ROI? We genuinely believe it's really significant here.
Thanks, Bill. Probably another one for you. Are you able to give us details on the types of range and payload that your vehicles have?
Yes, the model we broadly work on, because we think that this is a framework which will appeal to most courier companies, is that our micro vehicles will, Colin very helpfully referred to the use of mobile hubs and hubs out in the community rather than what you might term bricks and mortar hubs. We expect under those circumstances that one of our vehicles will be serviced by a much larger van, say 3 to 8 tons, and it would do 2 to 3 runs per day from that parent vehicle, if you want to use that phrase. And that would mean that on average, probably carrying about 40 kilograms of freight at a time. It depends on the nature of the business. And that means that very comfortably, the existing battery life that we would get, because we're talking of electric motors which are only a couple of kilowatts here. So the battery demands are very, very small, which is why we make such enormous CO2 savings. Those batteries already exist, which would give you 6 to 8 hours runtime. We don't think that it's necessary to use them in that way. So when one of our vehicles goes back to an 8-ton lorry, they simply would pick up a new battery and plug it straight in. Again, we don't think that the mileage capacity is a limiting factor. I mean, we'd be comfortable with the thought of our vehicles doing 40 to 50 miles on the battery life that is currently available. But because of the models that we've created and how they would operate, we don't actually see that it would, in practice, it would be necessary to go up to those. So although those are real world figures, we don't think they come into play, because the operating models that we've devised, and in their way, those are as important as the tech themselves. They kind of take those limiting factors out of the equation to a considerable extent.
And Laura, just to build on what Bill's saying, I think this is quite an important point. When human beings do planning, it's a bottom-up approach. So they'll create routes, absolutely, perhaps in areas, and assign vehicles to those routes and areas, and then try to get the best sequence of those routes, and that's absolutely fine. Being a former transport planner, I did that many, many years ago, so I know exactly how it's done. Optimization is top-down, completely different. So what it's doing is it's choosing the correct vehicles and how they interact with each other. So it isn't going to exceed the capabilities of said vehicle. So if said vehicle can do 50 miles or 30 miles or 20 miles, it's only going to put itineraries together to fit in with that, and then how that interacts with infrastructure. So to Bill's point about interacting with a parent vehicle that might have a swap out battery when it does that, that obviously is a mitigating factor for range anyway. But where it might make sense to work with another vehicle that doesn't have that battery swap out, but can still get the duty cycle done, but it's more efficient overall to do that, then the algorithms would choose that methodology. So that gives the ultimate flexibility for the fleet without having to manually worry about the problem, and you know, because the problem to work out is far more complex. So taking the top-down approach virtually guarantees you're not going to run out of range, or you're not going to allocate tasks that are not suitable both in weight and in time, and also distance.
I guess what you both said, potentially your solutions could help support current driver shortage issues that the sector's currently facing, or
That's starting to get dangerously political, Laura. If I might make a slightly wider point about the thinking which underpins our approach. The term gig economy conjures up all sorts of emotive reactions. We have concerns about some of them, but we also recognise that those in the sector do actually feel that this brings important benefits. What we've tried to know, what we have achieved, is technology and a supporting approach, which means that whether our vehicles would be operated by fleets or by individuals, gig drivers, it's equally well suited. And we particularly think that if it's a gig user, then the upfront cost is a big attraction. We don't want our technology, as it were, to result in people being put out of work. We think there are enormous benefits in having our vehicles driven rather than being autonomous. We actually do have an autonomous capability, and we're supported in that by Innovate UK. But we actually believe that the operation of our vehicles, and this applies also to the people with whom those vehicles interact, benefit greatly from having people on them. I actually think what underlies your question, Laura, is a bit more of a political thing, in the sense that if there is an inadequate supply of labour, then you've got to go out and find the labour. As I say, we don't want our tech to result in a significant reduction in employment, because we think employment's good. Clearly, there are benefits that can be derived, but that's more the angle from which we would approach the labour challenge, because it clearly is a big challenge. If we haven't got enough drivers, then we've got difficulties. But in terms of our tech, our goal is to facilitate fleets and gig, and also, so far as is possible, to support employment, because we think that's good for everybody.
Yeah, so what I'd like to take that one, specifically for driver shortage. So yeah, from if's point of view, clearly you've got to have a one-to-one ratio of the vehicles and the drivers to do it. But I think the key point there is you might have a different skill set required. For example, part of the driver shortages in recent years have been on HGVs, for example. So you've had to have a class 2 or class 1 license or whatever it may be. So, but that's now coming across the board to van drivers as well. I think, at TAT, we think optimization is an antidote and part of the toolkit for driver shortages. There's a press release we put out there recently around that, simply because we can increase vehicle utilization. So for example, if we need less vehicles to interact with the type of vehicles that Bill and if offer, then we've solved the driver shortage problem by increasing utilization from the depot to the vehicles that interact. And then in particular, if there's gig economy individuals using those vehicles and or the fleets themselves using those vehicles, through drivers. The combination of using less bigger vehicles, can help with the driver shortage problem as well. But optimization in its own right absolutely is part of a driver shortage, antidote.
Thanks both of you. One last one here. What factors does your route optimization software take into account in like local urban spaces? So probably for you, Colin.
Yeah, so I think what we need to do is separate what the algorithms and platform does from the mapping technology that we use. So the mapping technology we use, or the algorithms and the platform call upon to make its judgments around traffic conditions live, for example, or road furniture or road closures, is firmly with the mapping providers rather than the algorithm or the platform. So we call that technology through an API, to get, as I say, such things as traffic and even weather conditions as well. So I think the answer to the question is, where in urban areas there's maybe specialized vehicles need certain types of mapping so that the algorithms can interact with that, we would recommend using a certain type of mapping product to enable that vehicle type to be optimal. Whereas if it was just a van or a vehicle, then standard mapping with road networks is great. But we all know we can't send the likes of if.Vehicles or e-bikes down motorways and things like that. So clearly you want to have the right mapping technology, but it's the mapping is the answer here rather than the platform.
Although that was directed towards Colin, I wonder if I might give a slightly different perspective, Laura, on that from our point of view. Urban areas, as I'm sure we all experience, have their own distinctive needs. Those are changing rapidly, and they're going to continue to change rapidly as this debate about how you move stuff around towns evolves. I don't think anybody knows where it's going, and certainly from my own time in politics in the past, political people are really grappling with real challenges, and I don't think it's unreasonable for them to be struggling to come to terms because the environment in which they're operating is so demanding, so challenging. I think the beauty of what we're doing is that we're giving those decision makers technology which kind of goes with the grain of human nature. That's what we're trying to do, because we recognize that we all want parcels, because we do. We recognize also that we want clean, in environmental terms, environments in our towns and cities. You only have to look around the country and see where the clean air zones are being introduced to recognize that is a major factor. We also think that a key way of achieving these is actually to come up with the concept which we term portering. People call it different things, but it's drivers, as it were, getting out and functioning on their own feet rather than on a vehicle. And I think that's a really distinctive feature of our approach. And it's interesting that Ford with Hermes have kind of reached that conclusion. So what we want to do in those urban areas is to put people in there who are doing the deliveries, but in a way which is non-intrusive. It's not a threat to anybody's security, ankles, knees. The issues about blind people walking on pavements are really, really important. And so what we've sought to do is to come up with stuff which doesn't really require anybody significantly to change their ways of life, because human beings, we're small c conservative. We like to do the things that we're comfortable with. We'll change, but we kind of want to change at the margins. And we think the attraction of our technology is that it actually enables people to achieve these really big goals, yet in only very modest ways change the ways in which they're going about doing things. So I know it's from a slightly different angle, but that's how we look to come up with our tech. in terms of meeting the needs of those urban environments that the questionnaire was interested in.
No, both. Thank you very much, and thank you for the questions. I think it's provoked quite a bit of conversation there, so it was really interesting. Obviously, on behalf of the NEA, myself and Rohan, thanks to you, Bill, and you, Colin, for today. It's been a really interesting and a different kind of session, which I think, and hopefully everybody's enjoyed and taken away some benefits from it. The NEA will follow up with everybody. We'll send some details out to everybody as part of our standard format event follow-up. And we'll include details for both Colin and Bill should anybody look to make any contact thereafter. We will vet the recording, check with Colin and Bill that they're okay with that, and we'll share that afterwards as well with people should you like to pass it on to colleagues or anyone that was unable to attend. So another thank you from me. Thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Rohan. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you. Much appreciated. Thanks, Colin, too.
All the best.
All the best. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.